Now officially. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Mayor and Board of Trustees for the Village of Burr Ridge. It's November 12th. Happy belated Veterans Day. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you will all stand and join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Karen, may I have roll call, please?
Trustee Francis.
Here.
Trustee Model.
Here.
Trustee Fraser.
Here.
Trustee Matal.
Here.
Trustee Snyder.
Here.
Trustee Schiappa.
Here.
Mayor Strub.
Here. Okay, next order of business are the residents' comments, and the village administrator will read some instructions regarding that and procedures for those of you who would like to speak tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a public meeting of the Village of Burr Ridge Board of Trustees. Primary purpose of this meeting is for the Board of Trustees to conduct village business. If anyone has concerns or questions regarding issues not on the agenda, they should address those to the village staff during regular office hours. In order for the board to complete its business in an orderly, efficient, fair, and respectful manner, guidelines for participation are necessary. This time I've been asked to remind everyone of those guidelines. Anyone not following these rules of decorum by speaking out of turn or otherwise disrupting the meeting will be asked to refrain, after which anyone continuing to disrupt the proceedings may be asked to leave. The board's rules for public participation include the following. The mayor is the presiding officer at all Board of Trustees meetings. Anyone wishing to speak must first be recognized by the mayor. If you would like to speak, you must sign in. There are sign-in sheets available on the dais that can be passed around if anyone has not yet signed in. At the discretion of the mayor, the public comments may be made during the public comment section of the agenda or during the discussion of the agenda item. Each speaker should limit their comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. In the interest of time, questions will be addressed after everyone has had an opportunity to speak or by village staff at a later date and time. On behalf of the mayor and board, thank you for your participation and adherence to these procedures.
Now, is there anybody signed up yet? Are there any residents that like to address the board this time? No one? Okay, there are two. And did you sign in here by chance? Yeah, Richard Morgan, yes, he's first. You're always early.
Good evening, Mayor, trustees, Mr. Pollack. I'm here tonight. There's a resolution for you looking for immediate action and intervention with the United States and Illinois Environmental Protection Agencies regarding cybergen. And I want to just kind of highlight a couple of points relevant to styrogenics and ethylene oxide in our community. Some time ago, I used an Illinois Department of Public Health database that they make publicly accessible, and it's a cancer incident. It is a record of every cancer they've recorded. Goes back 20 some odd years. Looking at a 15-year window, you can find out that there appears to be more cancers than in background cities further away from Burr Ridge, Willowbrook, Darien, Hinsdale, Western Springs. And there's got to be a reason for it. If it's styrogenics, I don't know. I think it is. But I started to think about that in a different context yesterday. And I wondered how Illinois rates in terms of cancers to all other 50 states or 49 states. And I have a spreadsheet here. I'll be happy to share it with you. And I discovered that America as a whole, your chances per 100,000 are 439 cases. If you're unlucky enough to live in Illinois, it's 523. And that's again prepared by the Illinois Department of Public Health and NIH cancer people, so you can question their data. And I'd really like this village to try to understand why we live in this area with this higher cancer incident rate. It's really got me wrapped around the axle. A couple other points that I worry about. Ethylene oxide is one of the few chemicals that can explode from a ratio of 2% up to 100%. And the Illinois Department of Transportation thinks it's such an important chemical that they list in their 2004 response, which you can access on the internet, that the evacuation zone, if there's an event of a single 55-gallon drum of ethylene oxide, accident, truck turns over, punctures, and if it's nighttime, the evacuation is 1.5 miles. Did you guys know that it's 1.5 miles from a single 55-gallon drum? And we let this stuff come through here willy-nilly at a rate that I don't think any of us can understand. And if the village can do anything to restrict or control that, I think that would be a really positive step in the way of controlling ethylene oxide and the dangers it represents. There's also 2 quotes that I want to share with you tonight when you think about this. And these were quotes that were made by Dr. Peter Orris. Dr. Orris spoke to the original Willowbrook hearing back a couple months ago. He's the chief of occupational and environmental medicine, University of Illinois Hospital and Health Science Systems. I wrote to him and asked if I could share these quotes, and he gave me the permission. He says, ethylene oxide is a known cancer-causing agent and is dangerous at any level. He went on to say in a conversation with one of his associates, the problem with sterilization with ETO is that by definition, it's an open system with releases to the atmosphere. Now, I'm sure there's bright people with EPA and everywhere else, but for the moment, I'm going with Dr. Peter Orris, and I think that stereogenics and ethylene oxide in a heavily population area ought to be removed. Thank you for your time.
Well, I'm not sure if, why don't you ask them if, anyone wants to speak during the public section? Okay, one person. So is she on there?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. One more? Alice?
Sharon's gonna go first. Go first, please. Thank you. And I hope this, meets the criteria you stated up front. I promise I won't take much time. I want to be escorted out. This is just resident comments.
Is it, we're asking for public comments on non-agenda items. We prefer to have it at the end of the board meeting. That way we address the board business first.
Okay, I might have a time issue to wait till the end of the meeting, but if that's what's required, then I'll wait till the end of the meeting for the comments. All right.
Right.
So if it's
question. You've kind of changed the rules on us here. If it's not actually on your agenda, then how do we get something on the agenda in the future? All these people right here want to talk about the barn and the stable issue that was, we've tried to ask the board to have it remanded back to the Plan Commission. We also followed through with the, Mr. Pollock by sending individual emails out to these commissioners to try to get it on the agenda, and nobody did. But we would still like to ask that can that issue from past agenda be brought up to go on to another agenda maybe at the next meeting, because there are some other issues. I mean, I thought that during your section P here under other considerations, that if we spoke now, it would allow these trustees to listen to us and go under other considerations. So how does that work now?
That couldn't be added, you can't add something under consideration during a board meeting, can you?
You can't add items that the board would be taking action on
Right.
during a meeting. You're able to discuss anything you want to discuss, as long as you don't take action on it.
Okay, and that has to be opted by one of the trustees?
Correct.
Okay, well, if you, so what, attorney, Esquire, what do we do here?
Well,
So do you understand what I'm saying,
sure.
right?
There is a comment period after the board's business section of the meeting that
So-
still allows you.
Right, but that's way after P, other considerations. So our comments then would come after you guys can talk about it. How do I tell you that I want you to talk about something?
That's still an opportunity to do so. And the board still has the ability to talk about your issue after you, as a resident, have raised that issue at that portion of the agenda.
Okay, so they can still talk about it?
Yes.
All right, so can all of us then wait and talk about that former agenda item
Sure.
on the barn situation?
And as Mr. Pollock indicated, there may be issues that would be handled by staff, that the staff would respond to you about, and there may be issues that you can address to the village board, that they can address this evening or shortly thereafter, shortly after.
Because we have already been to see Mr. Pollock to get it here.
Understand.
Okay,
So we have a full agenda as we're trying to
Okay.
keep it going, so.
then we want to talk about it,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. Okay. No one else raised their hand, so.
Okay.
We'll move to the consent agenda. The omnibus vote. I always have a hard time saying that. Omnibus vote. All items listed with an asterisk are considered routine by the village board and will be acted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizens so request, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda. Under minutes, we have 5A, approval of regular board meeting of October 8th, 2018.
Move.
Is that guy?
Francis.
B, receive and file draft of a bicycle committee meeting of September 19th, 2018. C, receive and file draft of a plan commission meeting of October 15th, 2018. Ordinances. A, approval of an ordinance rezoning property from the R1 district to the R2A district of the Burbridge zoning ordinance Z 24/2018, located at 15W 601 89th Street. That's Thalmaria. B, approval of an ordinance approving a variation from section 11C 11A of the Burbridge zoning ordinance to eliminate the requirement for a perimeter landscape area on the rear lot line of a property and for a variation from section 4(1)(I)(2) to permit parking spaces within a required 8-foot side yard setback at V04-2018 150 Shore Drive, Petro. C, approval of an ordinance changing the name of Alicia Court to Jenny Court in the Meadowbrook Place subdivision. We have still under considerations, currently under resolutions. We have C, adoption of resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between the Village of Burbridge and Cook County for the provision of environmental health inspection services. D, adoption of resolution adopting the amended 2018 DuPage County Natural Hazards Mitigation Plan as the official plan of the village. E, approval of resolution authorizing the execution of a memorandum of understanding regarding the peer jury program between the Village of Downers Grove and the Village of Burbridge. Under considerations, we have 8F, approval of 2019 Village Board meeting schedule. G, presentation of calendar year third quarter strategic goals update. H, approval of recommendation to award contract for equipment outfitting new police vehicle number 1801 to Public Safety Direct in the amount of $7,329.53. I, approval of recommendation to award contract for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, HVAC systems, maintenance at village facilities to Dynamic Heating and Piping Company of Crestwood, Illinois, in the amount of $13,630. J, Approval of recommendation to award contract for janitorial services at village facilities to Echo Clean Maintenance Incorporated of Elmhurst, Illinois, in the amount of $27,890. K, approval of recommendation to award contract for the purchase of a replacement vehicle for Public Works Unit 36, Division Supervisor Pickup Truck to Curry Motors of Frankfort, Illinois, in the amount of $48,833. L, approval of recommendation to authorize Public Works Director to fill vacancy of a full-time General Utility 1 position. M, approval of request from the Willowbrook Burbridge Chamber of Commerce for contribution to the 2019 Chamber Directly. N, approval of vendor list dated October 22nd, 2018, in the amount of $1,193,974.35 plus, for all funds, plus $180,375.62 for payroll, for a grand total of $1,374,349.97, which includes $121,339.12 for special expenditures for the Chasemore Lincolnshire sidewalk paving. O, approval of vendor list dated November 12th, 2018, in the amount of $532,840.52 for all funds, plus $185,753.78 for payroll, for a grand total of $718,594.30, which includes $90,767 for special expenditures. May I have a motion to approve the following items on the consent agenda? That would be 5B, 5C, 6A, 6B, 6C, 7C, D and E, 8F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, and O.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder? Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Paveza?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. We have minutes, approval of regular board meeting removed by trustee Guy Francis.
Yes, thank you. So, in reviewing the draft of the meeting minutes on page 11124, bottom of the page, there is discussion of the stereogenics update. And in that text, if you want to call it up, that's fine. If not, I'll read it. Assistant to the Village Administrator Evan Walters stated on September 21st, 2018, additional stacking was completed. I don't believe that was what was said. It was additional stack testing was completed. It's the proper term. Now, you may think this is I'm making a big deal of nothing, but in actuality, terminology, data, and all the facts that are presented, we need to be crystal clear on them. We can't be repeating misinformation and hearsay. So, in this case, I think it's important we correct this term and make sure it's 100% correct.
Okay.
With that, I'll make a motion with the corrected terminology to move to approve the meeting minutes from the October 18th, 2018 Village Board meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Paveza?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. Under resolutions, consideration of resolution requesting immediate action and intervention of the United States and Illinois Environmental Protection Agencies regarding stereogenics in Willowbrook. I believe Trustee Francis, were you the one who had that on list?
Yes, I did. Could we see the resolution, possibly read it?
I'd be glad to provide a summary of the resolution.
Okay.
As directed by the village board at the October 8th board meeting, the village attorney has prepared this resolution. The resolution, in summary, resolves to request immediate action and intervention of the United States and the state of Illinois Environmental Protection Agencies regarding stereogenics in Willowbrook, specifically stating that the board hereby requests the immediate action and intervention of the United States and Illinois Environmental Protection Agencies to act under their permitting authority to further monitor, test, and analyze the air quality at and around the stereogenics facility in Willowbrook and in adjacent communities, and to shut down or initiate those actions necessary to cause the shutdown of of all operations of Sterigenics resulting in any discharge or emissions of ethylene oxide until it is definitively established through reliable testing results that no residents or workers are at any risk due to exposure to ethylene oxide discharges or emissions from the Sterigenics facility in Willowbrook. The resolution further requests that the Attorney General of the State of Illinois and the DuPage and Cook County State's attorneys undertake enforcement actions and that the board resolves to take such actions to support and collaborate with the above agencies to best promote and ensure the safety of the area air quality. The village attorney and I are both available to answer any questions you may have.
Trustee Snyder?
Scott, in your opinion, the village, I'm in support of a lot of things, especially in the situation we're in. If the village goes ahead and jumps in, the EPA and files or joins it anyway, does the village have any exposure for being any retaliatory from suits or anything from anywhere?
Into the action that's been filed by the
Yes.
Illinois Attorney General already?
Yes.
Yes, being involved in any litigation, any litigant exposes themselves to the litigation process. So if the village is involved in, I don't know that, first of all, I don't know if this resolution is calling for the village to be involved, directly involved in the litigation.
Okay.
It is asking both the Illinois Attorney General and the United States Environmental Protection Agency to do all that they have within their power to investigate these circumstances, to generate the necessary data immediately regarding the discharges or emissions from the Sterigenics plant, and to act upon that data as soon as possible. The Attorney General has acted at this point to file suit to enforce all the provisions of the Illinois Environmental Protection Act that apply here, and to bring a public nuisance action. So this resolution does not involve the village being part of that litigation. If the village chose to become part of the litigation, they have to ask the Attorney General if they could join the litigation at this point.
So you're stating we can join this particular, or we can go with this action and not have any issue blow back to the village?
No, if we're involved in litigation, if we become a party to this litigation, if we were allowed to join the litigation, that's up to the Attorney General in part, up to the court in part, whether anyone else would be allowed to be part of this litigation. If you are part of litigation, you become subject to all the processes that involve a litigant, meaning you could be involved in depositions, the elected officials that sit here, any experts that you might hire, the village might hire to assist the village, village staff that would be involved in putting together any action to become involved in the litigation. You'd be part of those processes.
So there's two things. One, would our insurance prevent or protect us as a village? Second, if we went ahead and did this and there is no, so it's all in cost based on, for us to pay, the village would pay for everything being in if it comes back to us.
Correct. I'm not aware of any insurance coverage that the village would have for this action if you intervened. The cost would be borne by the village.
Okay.
You're not aware, or is it?
It's not clear.
To my knowledge, there wouldn't be any coverage, but I'm not aware of any coverage either. Any special coverage here?
Related to passing this resolution?
No, related, related, if the village became involved, let's.
Actually, this is not we're not talking about, you're talking about litigation, but this is talking about a resolution.
Right, so there's.
Let's separate the two.
So if we're talking just about the resolution, obviously, that doesn't involve any kind of insurance coverage at all, nor any cost to the village.
Okay.
Is there any legal liability to passing this resolution?
Nope. It's a resolution supporting immediate action by the agencies that have jurisdiction in this area.
In the event that what? I think it was in the event that was determined, or there's any emissions, or is it what is it really calling for?
Well, it calls for a couple of things. One is that they generate any and all data that they can at this point in this site, adjacent to and in the immediate vicinity of the plant, that they rely on that data to bring any actions to enforce current environmental laws, and that they act to protect residents by, if they can, obviously this is the Attorney General that has to make that judgment, to cease operations at the plant until they can satisfy themselves, they being the Environmental Protection Agency, both at the federal level and the state level, that all emissions coming from the plant currently are safe. So that requires their assessment of the current data and generation of additional data.
So based on what Trustee Miles said, we have no legal liability.
Correct. Under this resolution, we're not assuming any responsibility or liability.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Statements in the resolution like Sterigenics is emitting elevated levels of cancer-causing chemical, I was under the impression that they've now ceased their emissions and again, none of these things are a problem for us having those types of words in the resolution from a village standpoint.
No, these come from the federal agency that completed an assessment in 2014 and from a county resolution, similar county resolution that examined the data that we currently have.
Mr. Model? I'm sorry, Francis.
I'd like to make the motion to approve the resolution requesting immediate action from the United States Environmental Protection Agency and the Illinois Environmental Protection Agencies regarding Sterigenics in Willowbrook.
Second.
There's a motion.
Second.
Okay, second. Any discussion?
Although I thought that the three presidents or mayors have been on this for the last 6 weeks trying to get this done. Because I know you've written several letters, Willowbrook, Darien. To me, this just seems like duplication of effort, but if that'll push the situation any faster, I'll go along with it, but it's my understanding we've already done this.
Scott?
Well, we have an active action that's been, fortunately, that's been filed by the Illinois Attorney General. If that's the action we're looking for, I think this supports that action that the Attorney General has taken and reinforces the need, continues to request that the Attorney General do all they can and the IEPA do all they can to collect additional data and monitor the air quality in this area to a degree that they can draw reliable conclusions about the safety of the plant.
Trustee Model?
And should we choose to join that suit or take other actions?
Well, it's not, this is not about the suit.
Right. Well, I just want to make sure that passing this motion, that doesn't limit our other options and doesn't, might this motion change after we have some more discussions about other things later on? I want to make sure we're fully informed of what the full options are and that we've not limited ourselves or done anything, that wouldn't allow us to protect the residents properly.
So it does. Section 3 of the resolution reads, the board, that's this board, village board, also resolves to take such actions to support and collaborate with the above agencies to best promote and ensure the safety of the area air quality, atmosphere, and environment, to protect area residents and workers from the adverse health impacts of any discharge or emission. So, no, it expressly leaves open any and all options that you as a village have.
I agree.
Trustee Francis?
To reinforce what Al was saying, Al, this gives you the opportunity as an elected official and as a trustee to speak on behalf of the residents that elected you, to reinforce what has already been said by the village presidents and the mayors of the surrounding communities, that this operation, this facility really doesn't belong in our backyard.
Is that what it says?
Basically.
Or is that editorial item?
Cease and desist operations until they can be proven that they're operating in a safe and efficient manner.
We want also, I think, by approving the resolution, the board is asking that any and all actions be taken to ensure that the continued operation of the plant is safe for all area residents and workers.
And last question, I think, Ultimately, who has say over this? I mean,
The Illinois Attorney General's office.
and this is just saying where we're agreeing with the Illinois Attorney General to proceed as they are to help keep us safe.
To continue their efforts. And again, fortunately, they have filed. They acted relatively quickly after multiple villages, including this village, asked for their intervention.
Any other discussion? Motion and a second. Roll call?
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Baveza?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Scapa?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. Yeah, I'm sorry, anybody mention that topic? Barbie? Actually, are there any other, I'm sorry, it looks like we missed the opportunity, if anybody else would like to voice their opinion regarding this topic. Are there any residents that would like to weigh in? Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, there is one person.
Hi, my name is Mike Marino. I don't know exactly what you talk about but on this thing, but well, first of all, I'd like to thank all our veterans today for their service. And I was listening to the gentleman in the wheelchair, and that really arose my attention. Is this in regards to not letting that plant here?
Regarding what?
This thing that's they're supposed to build in Willowbrook?
No, this is regarding a current company called Sterigenics in Willowbrook. That's been an issue that's been going on since the end of August.
And our village is against that, right?
Yeah, well, obviously, we're trying to keep it safe, making sure that we're concurring with everyone else's efforts.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Under Resolutions 7B, consideration of a resolution of support and financial commitment for the Safe Routes to School grant for flashing pedestrian beacons on Wolf Road.
Thank you, Mayor. Management Analyst Andres Beltran will address this very briefly.
Would you like to introduce him?
Yes, I would, thank you. I would like to introduce to the board, some of you have met Andres, and introduce to the board and to the community, Andres Beltran. Andres started September 17th?
October 8th.
October 8th, that's right. I don't know why I had that in mind. October 8th as our management analyst, and he's involved mostly in community development work and supporting community development efforts, administration, as well as public works and the village in general, working with doing code enforcement work for the village, plus other special projects. Right now, the special project that Andres is working on is seeking grant funding for the pedestrian beacon on Wolf Road. And in order to support those efforts, Andres would like to present the resolution supporting our application. Andres?
Thank you. Yes, this is a resolution supporting applying for the Wolf Road pedestrian beacons near Pleasantdale Middle School. The Safe Routes to School grant is kind of self-explanatory. It's a federal grant that is passed to the state that then gets passed to local communities to help children get to school that are within walking distance or biking distance. This grant would address an issue that has been brought to the board before. I believe Dave Price gave a presentation on it in August about constructing flashing pedestrian beacons near the Wolf Road, where there has been some incidents before with pedestrians and students going to school as well as vehicles. So the Safe Route to School grant is 100%, this year is 100% reimbursable grant, and that is part of the resolution, is that the village would put up the money beforehand, and then with the grant, if it's we would put up the money beforehand if the grant is awarded, and then those costs would be reimbursed to it. Normally, that grant is provided or is awarded in next March, and I believe if that was awarded next March, construction would be would start taking place in July and probably finish shortly in about 3 to 4 weeks, from my understanding of it. There's also good support on this, both Pleasantdale Middle School as well as Pleasantdale Park District were originally partners in it, but as you may remember, originally the engineering costs were significantly less than what the bids came in at, and that's what kind of killed the project. So the project is ready to go as long as there's funding that comes through, and that's what this resolution is in support of from the village. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer it.
Trustees? Questions? Okay.
I'll make a motion to develop the resolution of support for the financial commitment for the Safe Routes to School grant for flashing pedestrian beacons on Wolf Road.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Scalpa?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Baveza?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. Okay, now presentation of the, under considerations, presentation discussion regarding the NICOR meter modernization replacement program.
Yes, I'd like to introduce some representatives from NICOR. I'll let them introduce themselves, but they are here to give the board and the public an overview of their meter modernization replacement program, which is in process with, they'll tell you the timing and what it's all about. So.
Good evening, my name is Diana Jenkins and I'm a member of the meter modernization team at NICOR Gas. That is the name of our program. However, it is an AMI technology, so advanced metering infrastructure. And what that is basically gathering the meter reads automatically versus today. We do that with manual meter reading. We have meter readers that walk from home to home, and we read the meters every other month. Okay, I didn't know if you had that up behind me. Wanted to speak to all of you a little bit about the technology, just so you have an understanding as well as the residents. Our technology is similar to that of the Burr Ridge Water. We use Census technology. The difference is that our technology is RF through towers, so we will be putting what they are called as base stations up on the towers, and they will read to the devices, and Kevin has a device here that is put on the meter. It's my understanding from Doug that you have an AMR system, which means that it's a drive-by system. It still uses RF technology to gather the reads, but it's done every 2 months. Our reads will be gathered daily. They can be more often if we need to on our larger volume customers. However, our device only wakes up every 4 hours, so 6 times in a day, and it's for around 30 seconds. So it's not, how it is different, and sometimes we need to explain this, how it's different than an electric AMI technology is that electric replaces meters, and because it's electric, they're always on and listening. Our device is battery operated, and it only wakes up and says, is anybody talking to me? Yes, no, transmit, and it only transmits reads. So that's the difference. We cannot shut gas meters off with this technology, and we cannot, we won't, because of a safety issue, turn the gas back on because there's more things required with that from a gas perspective. In regards to the communication plan and what we're doing to notify your residents, Burr Ridge sits in the middle of 2 of our territories, one that we call Central and one that we call Metro that butts up to like the Bellwood area. So currently we have sent out communication to approximately 100 of your residents. We start with a postcard that says we are going to be in your area soon, and then we will send out about 7 to 15 days prior to being out and installing, and it's not NICOR Gas employees, it's vendors that work on our behalf that will be installing these devices. They are notified that we will be there, and when we come to the premise, we will knock on the door, the vendor will, and talk to the customer, the resident, about what we are doing. So they've received 2 pieces of communication. The day that they're there, they make an attempt to talk to the customer. If the customer's not home and the gas meter is outside and we're able to install it, we will leave a tag to let the customer know that we were there and that we installed it. And we also have our phone number as well as our vendor's phone number. So if there's any questions on the install process, if they feel that the vendor did something inappropriate or damaged something, they can reach out to us or the vendor themselves to take care of that. And we do have, in part of the packet too, it shows the pictures of what our installers look like. Your residents will see our installers have a hard hat, a vest, an ID that says who they are, the company they work with, as well as part of being working for Nicor Gas. Their vehicles also have a co-branding. In this area, it is Grid 1 Solutions, and on the bottom of their vehicles, it will say a Nicor Gas contractor, so they are notified that way as well. And if any time any of the residents have any concerns, they can call us directly and find out if these folks are working for us. It also includes some pictures of 2 actual installers from Grid 1 Solutions, just to show the residents and all of you what it looks like when we install. It's a simple 4-screw scenario. You take the screws off, you put their index on, and you put the device on. We do not have to disrupt gas service when we're putting the devices on.
Do we have pictures of that? Or,
Sure. Could you pass the device on also, please? Thank you.
Yeah, so this is actually one of the installers out in one of our locations, and this is also the vehicle. And you will see the vehicle parked on the side of the street, and they'll work several houses at a time and then go back to the vehicle.
So then no one's going to come out to take readings because it's automatically...
Correct. Once the device is installed, and we have several back office processes to ensure that the device is reading appropriately and it's billing appropriately. We don't put the device on and automatically bill. We have checks and balances prior to doing that. But once it is installed and they're being billed, we will no longer physically walk by the premise.
And the installer that'll come will say it's a Nicor Gas contractor?
Yes.
On their vehicle?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And they have ID. They're required to carry ID as well.
you had said that it was turned on 4 times a day for how many seconds?
Up to 30 seconds. What it does is it wakes up and it listens to see if anything's trying to communicate to it, and that would be to gather reads. If it is not, it will go back to sleep.
Interesting. Okay.
Hello.
Trustee Francis?
Yes, thank you. So this will eliminate 6 estimated reads per year, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How long is the battery life?
The battery life is 20 years.
Okay. And how will this work in conjunction with our water meters?
So although we are on similar megahertz, the 900, we are on different frequencies.
Okay.
So it should not interfere gas versus water.
Okay. And you mentioned that the installers will have ID badges. Will they be Nicor ID badges or Grid 1?
They will be contractor. It says contractor on the ID badge. Sandy, do you know if it has the Nicor gas piece on it?
On the back of the ID, it has Nicor gas.
Okay.
That would be helpful.
If your batteries last 20 years, have you considered going into the fire alarm business?
One thing at a time.
Just saying.
And how can our residents be assured that these aren't hackable or tamperable, and that, false readings couldn't be presented, by malicious actors, or turn off their gas or something like that by malicious actors?
Right. And I'll reference turning off the gas first. With the device itself, you cannot do that. It's physically in the valve, right? In regards to the security piece of it, we are working with our internal security team to encrypt all of the modules. And once they are encrypted, you have to have specific keys to decrypt or unencrypt. Even our people do, to work on the device if needed.
Any questions? Trustee Schiappa?
So these wireless meters are going to be installed on all gas?
On all of our 2.2 million customers in our entire territory, Nicor Gas.
Is this something that's required? Does every customer have to
install?
Nicor Gas is not offering an opt-out. Our intent is to install on every meter. So from a Nicor Gas perspective, yes, it's required.
Is it, is there any legislation behind it?
Legislation in regards to the,
Requiring the residents to have it installed?
we have, and I can't quote the sections, but we have the right to access our meter.
Okay.
And that's in part of our riders, and through our rates and those types of things. And the whole process that we're discussing, we have worked with the ICC on, and they're aware of how we're communicating to residents and what we're installing.
Thank you.
Trustee Model?
I'm assuming this is a cost-saving thing for Nicor, probably, so hopefully our residents can expect some gas savings in the future.
I can't speak to that directly. What I will say is that we have a whole department. We have 180 meter readers today. The intent is that they will attrit to promotions, which is happening. Our intent is not to lose any of our employees to this automation. And so the hope is that maybe in the future, yes, that will be the case because they're physically not there, walking by.
And once again, this is external installation.
Yes, it is. It does not interrupt gas service, and if the customer does not have an inside meter, they have an outside meter, we can install. They don't have to be home for us to install it. If we have access to our meter, we can install.
Okay, so what percentage of homes have inside meters?
Probably around right now 100,000 of our 2.2 million.
I'm sorry, 100,000?
100,000 customers have inside meters.
In what geographic area is that?
That's our entire territory. A lot of it is concentrated by what we call the banana area around the city. But we have another program investing in Illinois that's going on now also, and has been going on, I think, for the past few years, that is moving meters outside. It's improving our infrastructure.
So but we don't know how many in Burr Ridge, for example.
In Burr Ridge specific, I do not, but I can provide that information.
And just curious, we'd be curious what we can tell the residents as to what the likelihood is of anybody knocking on the door and asking for access, because everybody's, of course, leery about someone coming into their home,
So from a project perspective, they have the IDs. They should only be in the home once to install the device. However, regular Nicor Gas employees, if the meter stays inside, will need to gain access. If someone were to call in a gas leak or to do our survey work, that's 3 to 5 years, depending on what the survey is. Nicor Gas employees always carry their IDs.
And will you be doing a mailing, or is that part of the billing process, or to alert residents also?
Yep. The first piece that we do is the postcard, which is about 30 to 45 days out. And then we have a letter that is also sent to the resident 7 to 15 days out prior to installing the device or making the attempt to.
Okay.
So what is the timeline for this? Is it going to start now in the winter or in the spring?
We started the project overall in our what we call the Fox Valley area, which is our Aurora, Batavia, Yorkville area, and then we started over in our Central Glen Ellen territory, which part of Burr Ridge is part of, in August. The total project is 3.5 years. We started organizing last year, so our intent is to complete our entire 2.2 million by the end of 2020.
Okay, any other discussion? Any, oh, that was just presentation discussion. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Under considerations 8B, update regarding Sterigenics in Willowbrook, Illinois.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
You and Evan are going to
I would like to ask Evan Walter, Assistant to the Village Administrator, to give the latest update.
Thank you, Board. Thank you, Doug. As stated, I'm just going to do a quick overview of the updates that the village has been involved in, made aware of over the past 5 weeks since our last board meeting. Our most recent communications have been with the DuPage County Department of Health. They have issued a press release detailing their intention to test private wells within the vicinity of Sterigenics. We've been told it's about 1 mile to 1.5 miles out. Our Public Works Director has been working with the DuPage County Department of Health to help identify where those wells are. Those are mostly located in unincorporated areas. The primary purpose of that test is to test for something called ethylene glycol. This is a byproduct of ethylene oxide that becomes more apparent in water. And they're testing those wells to ensure that the drinking water and most of the potable water in this area is safe. So again, that test is being done right now. Actually, they're in the process of gaining access to all these private wells. Again, these are homeowners with wells on their properties and their backyards that they use for drinking or other purposes. They're in the process of canvassing right now. They are estimated that will take about 2 more weeks at the most to gain all the access they need. And then it'll take several more weeks to complete all of their testing, and then a little bit further time to do data analysis. But we're told that we should expect to see some action on the ground with testing within the month of November. We've also been working closely with our contractor, GHD. At the October 8th board meeting, the board approved a line item to go ahead and conduct independent testing. Staff anticipates that we will be conducting testing as well as have data back this month by the end of November. So we've been in constant communication with them about finding the right time, identifying correct weather patterns, identifying days where there won't be rain, and then working to find sites that are of interest to the public within the village. So we've been, again, in constant communication with GHD on that particular topic. I also want to talk quickly about an open house and community meeting that's planned on Thursday, November 29th. This is a meeting that is being held at Ashton Place in Willowbrook and hosted by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. The purpose of this open house is to discuss what has happened with Sterigenics, what the current steps are with the EPA, as well as to understand what will happen going forward. There'll be 2 components to this particular open house. The first is that we'll have open house sessions from 3 to 6 p.m. This will be a time for people to come early, to register questions, to just familiarize themselves almost with the process that will occur later that evening. And the actual meeting will begin at 7 p.m. And at that point, there will be a facilitator hired by the EPA to conduct this meeting on behalf of the EPA, as well as all the other participants who will be attending on behalf of our respective government functions. We'll have opportunities for Q&A. Again, residents and anyone else in the community will have the opportunity to ask questions. It will be, we're scheduled to be about 3 hours right now, so we anticipate a full meeting. Again, 3 to 10 p.m. for lack of a better time frame, so it will be a long day, but an important day, and a day where everybody from the community can hopefully come out, get more answers, get updates on what's going on in the community, ask questions that are important to them, and make sure that they feel like they're heard in this entire process. A lot of us feel affected by this issue, but the most important thing is that we have a communal effort going forward on this particular matter. There also is a hearing this week in Springfield. I believe it's the 13th. Is it the 13th? Yeah, thank you. I wasn't sure if it was the 13th or 14th. That's in Springfield. The topic is ethylene oxide. I attended the hearing that occurred in Chicago on October 28th or 29th. It was a couple Fridays ago. That was the first of what sounds like a few hearings on the topic of ethylene oxide, just trying to gather more information at the state level so the state assembly can make better decisions. These hearings are in support of 2 particular bills that are before the state right now. They have been put forward by Senator Curran and Leader Durkin. Both of these bills would outlaw the use of ethylene oxide in Illinois by 2022. So again, those are concurrent bills in the House and the Senate within the state assembly. And these hearings are to help the assembly members to try and gain more information about what they're actually being asked to consider. So that is tomorrow in Springfield. I do my best to attend these. This one's a little outside of my, I can't take the metro there for lack of a better word, so I will not be in attendance, but I will do my best to watch the hearing and provide dialogue with the residents the best I can. That is the majority, really the bulk of what I would want to talk about tonight. Obviously, the staff and mayor, we have attended several meetings in the last 3 or 4 weeks. There was one in the village of Western Springs hosted by Mayor Gallagher. Friday the 26th was the hearing I attended downtown. And then, of course, on the 30th, we all heard about the Attorney General's suit in conjunction with the DuPage County State's Attorney. That was the complaint filed against Sterigenics in open court. So that was the extent of the update I wanted to provide. Are there any questions or anything I should expound upon?
Do you have any questions? Trustee Francis?
So you mentioned the 2013 spill of ethylene glycol at the Sterigenics facility. Do you know any more information about the spill? The quantity that was spilled, was the soil remediated? If so, to what extent was it remediated?
I do not have the exact specifics on that. However, I'd be happy to work with our community group. I'm pretty sure I've actually talked about this with Kathleen on this matter. But that, I know the facts only came out because we kind of heard about that by accident. There was not a self-reporting mechanism regarding that spill, but I'd be happy to follow up and post a report on that particular incident on our website.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Evan? Thank you, Evan. Is there any additional comments from residents? We have one. Make sure it's on the list. Kelly? I'm sorry?
I just wanted to thank Ed for being such a great resource for the community.
Actually, can you do me a favor? Go to the microphone and put this on. We got to get this on tape. So if you, well, this is great. Whenever.
Great. It's a compliment.
It is a compliment. We don't hear too many compliments, and love to hear them. So.
There's a mic on. That's the mic.
Oh, okay. Going on record saying that I'm very appreciative to Evan Walter for his availability. He's an excellent resource to have stepped. a wonderful man. And I will add that I'm not sure what the discourse is within the trustees, but I would hope that Mr. Model will take Evan up on his availability and his knowledge base so that you don't ask a question about are the emissions still being emanated, because that's a question I wouldn't expect from a trustee when you have a resource right here available.
We're supposed to keep it with compliments, okay?
Be positive.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. My point was to learn and make sure I understood what was happening too, so thank you. I appreciate it.
She should have said her name.
Okay. Presentation of proposed tax, I'm sorry?
She should have said, we should say who that was.
Oh, he knows. Kathleen O'Hara?
Yes, thank you.
For the record.
Thank you. Moving on to C, presentation of a proposed tax levy for 2019.
Thank you, Mayor and Board of Trustees. As we do every year at this time, we announce the proposed tax levy and announce that we will be holding a public hearing for that tax levy at our December 10th meeting. To provide you some background, an overview of the tax levy, Jerry Sapp, our Finance Director, is here to go over that with you and answer any questions after that. Jerry?
Good evening. It's November and it's tax levy time. This is our first step in our annual budget process. The tax levy is proposed in November, and we hold a public hearing and file an ordinance in December, and then it is levied and collected by the county assessor in 2019, and then we receive it as part of our fiscal year 2019-2020 budget. Tax levy is composed of three separate levies. The corporate levy, which we use for general governmental services, the police protection levy, which we use for police services, and then the police pension levy, which is considered the employer contribution to the police pension fund. The village levies an amount underneath the tax cap limiting rate. That's the formula set up by the county assessor's office under the tax cap, and it follows this five-step process. First, we estimate what our new equalized assessed valuation will be, and then we calculate what our limiting rate will be by the formula given to us by the county assessor's office underneath the tax cap. We take the limiting rate and we apply the limiting rate to what we estimate our EAV is going to be, and that determines the dollars available for the tax levy. Then we allocate what the statutory requirement is for the police pension fund, and then apply any remaining dollars to the corporate and police levy to complete our levy request. This next slide, it kind of summarizes these 5 steps. Last year we had a actual EAV of $1,189,000,000, and then this year we're estimating our EAV to be $1.261 billion. And we came up with that estimate by using a 2% increase in value and a 4% increase in new construction. And the far column, that's what we had calculated our limiting rate under the formula. And so when we apply the limiting rate of 0.0996 to our estimated EAV, we come up with available $1,256,195 property tax dollars. Right off of the top of that goes $758,505 to the police pension fund, and the remaining $498,000 goes to the general fund revenues. So what that means to your tax bill? We have one of the lowest components of a village resident tax bill. It represents less than 2% of the tax bill, or 0.016 of every tax dollar represented on the resident's tax bill. And using an example of a $600,000 home in Burr Ridge, anticipate taxes going up about $4.18 on the village component in DuPage County, and $3.71 on the Hicks. In summary, the 2008 estimated standard tax levy is $1,256,195. We have a limiting rate of 0.0996. It comes up to $72,266, and then we're required to hold a public hearing under the Truth in Taxation Law at the next and the regular board meeting on Monday, December 10th, 2018, and we're recommending that the proposed tax levy for 2018 be accepted, and that staff be authorized to prepare the necessary notice for the public hearing on December 10th. Any questions?
Is this the same rating rate as last year?
Real close. It was 0.0095 last year.
And we're estimating it at 0.996.
Correct.
Okay. And the same thing with the EAV?
The EAV was...
well, we're estimating 2018.
Yes.
Okay. And that limiting rate is the same for Cook and DuPage?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Alan.
Residents keep talking to us and complaining about how high taxes are in Burr Ridge, and I wish there was some way that we could emphasize more. Our village portion is 0.016 of the tax bill, you know, and it's the schools and other reasons why. It's not the village. In fact, I wish there was some way we could find a way to let the people know about that.
Any other questions of our finance director?
No.
Anything else you'd like to add? Trustee, or for village administrator, anything?
So we're looking for a motion to direct staff to prepare the legal notice for the public hearing for the December 10th village board meeting.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Schiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Pazuza?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
6-0.
Next, the presentation of options for funding the Capital Improvements Road Program.
Do you want to address that now or come back to it?
Well, let's do it now.
Okay.
It's a famous last words, plenty of time.
Okay, well, as we had promised the board during last year's budget preparation cycle, beginning of 2018, we had promised the village board that we would come back before the next budget cycle and present to you just a basic overview of our capital projects funds. And begin the discussion or consideration of how, what type of strategy and how we want to fund the capital projects funds for this coming year and future years. As a general background, village services are most, if not all of our ongoing services are funded by the general fund. And the general fund is in good condition. We, in fact, typically have surpluses in the general fund at the end of the year. And those surpluses are usually transferred to other funds for what are typically one-time expenditures, such as a new roof on a building or whatever. But the amount of surpluses in the general fund have gone down over the years, and thus the need to address capital projects funds. What does capital projects funds include? It includes the capital improvement fund, which includes the road program, arterial street project, and village capital improvements such as building remodeling projects, chiller unit for the village hall this current fiscal year, and similar types of projects. Second major fund within capital projects is the sidewalk and pathway fund. Third, equipment replacement fund, and fourth is the stormwater management fund. The premise of this discussion is that due primarily to long-term trends of decreases in general fund surpluses, and I'll get into those specifics in a minute, and increases in percentage of property tax that goes toward the police pension fund, funding for capital projects needs to be addressed. Most specifically, the village road program for maintaining local streets is an annual recurring expense, and as such is in need of a reliable revenue source to maintain the program at current and historical service levels. The other capital projects funds besides the capital improvements, sidewalk and pathway fund, that's funded primarily from developer donations and grants. Well, I should say exclusively from developer donations and grants historically. We begin to see a deficit in fiscal year 1920. No new projects are planned at this time beyond 2021. And the 2009 sidewalk plan for the village includes $1 million in high priority projects that have not been done and are not in the pipeline, plus other projects that are lower priority or may be funded by other sources. Sidewalk maintenance also we'll be seeing $500,000 or more, and that's a low estimate, needed for replacement of asphalt sidewalks, such as we recently did with the Chasemore pathway. It's the pathway located behind Chasemore Townhome, so you can kind of get a sense of where the sidewalk and pathway fund is. The equipment replacement fund, that's been funded through transfers from the general fund beginning in fiscal year 18, the fiscal year 18-19 budget shows a deficit in fiscal year 19-20. However, we postponed the purchase of a street sweeper. We've started doing that on a contract basis. That seems to be working very well. So we don't think we'll need to purchase a street sweeper in any foreseeable future. And so all that did, though, that was a $300,000 purchase that was deferred, and all that did was push our deficit, potential deficit, back 1 year to fiscal year 2021. The funding strategy for equipment replacement fund has been to transfer surpluses as they become available and to delay purchases whenever possible. The budget includes a detailed list of all village equipment, and it amortizes that equipment over time, and so it shows us how much money, the expected lifespan of a vehicle or a piece of equipment, and in theory, how much money you'd have to put into the fund each year to make sure when that lifespan is over, there's funds to replace it. That's the plan, but right now, we are in a positive in the black in that fund, but we will be in a deficit soon if we do not continue to fund it with other transfers.
Excuse me, may I just jump in for a moment? As far as how the revenue is traveling right now, that rate is traveling, do we have any way of seeing any uptick from the additional hotels we've had and extra business we've had of late? Do we see an increase in sales tax receipts?
Yes.
Year to date?
I mean, the hotel tax fund shows, it's probably the healthiest fund that we have, but it's also the most restricted fund. That money can only be used for programs that encourage overnight stays at the hotels. So we can't use that to do a residential street program.
Right.
We'll get into that in a few minutes as one of the options. Sales tax have been steady and strong, and we could expect them to continue to be, but not to the point where it's going to grow enough to solve this issue that before us right now. And we'll get to that again in a few minutes. Final other capital projects fund is the Stormwater Management Fund. That revenues there comes from permit fees and transfers from the general fund. That fund reserve is in need of being increased. This past year, we had failure of a storm pipe on County Line Road, and we had to transfer funds from the general fund to pay for that because we did not have enough reserves in the Stormwater Management Fund. And finally, the big one, the Capital Improvement Fund, underneath capital projects, and that includes the road program, arterial street projects, and village capital improvements, which I referenced before. Historical sources of revenue for the Capital Improvement Fund, grants for arterial street projects such as 79th Street. We have a grant to do Burr Ridge Parkway next year. And then usually matching funds for those grants come from general fund transfers. One-time revenue sources for other capital expenditures such as remodeling of the Village Hall restroom facilities, transfer from, I think we're transferring from our IRMA account, or general revenue or surpluses in the general fund for those one-time expenditures that don't occur every year, but nonetheless need to be funded when they do occur. And finally, in the most important, I think the most significant capital projects fund is the annual road program. Our road program in Burr Ridge is unique in its quality and in its progressive approach to maintaining our streets. I think one of the things we all know that residents are most proud of in this village, besides the people of the village, is the quality of our roads. And we hear it all the time. People comment on how much they appreciate the proactive efforts that the village has been doing for 25 years or more to keep our roads in good condition. It's a capital project, and most people think of capital projects as one-time projects, but really the annual road program, it is a recurring every year project. And as such, we feel it is in need of consistent and reliable funding. 40% of, we spend about $750,000 on average each year for a road program. 40% of that comes from motor fuel tax, usually around $310,000 a year. That's reliable. We get about the same every year. So at least that foundation is there every year, and that money can only be used on roads. So that is there. 60% of that historically, though, has been from general fund transfers. How do we, just going back a step here, overview of what is our road program. Our road program, we're talking about local residential streets, the streets that people live on, cul-de-sacs, local streets, collector streets. And the lifespan of a typical Burr Ridge street is construction of the street. We do a biennial survey of road conditions every other year. Public Works is out there surveying every single street in the village, and they have a detailed assessment sheet that they mark up and assess the condition of each street in the village. That's done every other year. We then use that information to rate the streets and determine which streets need patching and crack sealing, and which streets are in line for resurfacing. Resurfacing usually occurs every 15 to 20 years for any given street. That life cycle maintenance program is intended to avoid major reconstruction and limit the amount of patching required on our streets. And as I said, it's been a successful program and one I believe that the village wants to maintain. Where does the funding for the road program come from? 40% comes from the motor fuel tax, as I said, average $310,000 per year. 50 to 60% comes from general fund transfers, average about $400,000 per year. And other revenue sources when available, which historically has been about 6% of the road program over the last 20 or so years. What are those other revenue sources? Well, they're generally one-time opportunities that are usually not repeatable or not reliable, such as developer donations or forfeited building bonds. We had a program several years ago where we audited our bonds, and we determined that we attempted to return bonds, but those that weren't claimed were forfeited, and that went to the road program. Obviously, that's a one-time source. Interest income, that's a continuous source, but not a significant source of revenue. And we had another example is the Opus transfer fees that on their real estate closings, we had a one-time program of collecting transfer fees. So you can see from that we've patched together we've done a really good job of finding money for the road program every year, but there are circumstances out there that concern us and is the reason for us coming to you today. Now, these circumstances are not new. They've been going on for the last 10 years or more. And the two main reasons that the opportunities for general fund transfers are declining has to do with our police pension fund portion of the property tax and declining revenues from building permits. And as you can see in the charts on building permits, going back to the numbers, from 1998 to 2008, our average revenues from building permits was $614,000. From 2009 to 2018, it was $383,000. So you can see right there nearly over $200,000 decrease annually. Similar with the property tax in the police pension fund. From 1998 to 2000, the average portion of the property tax that went to the police pension fund was 46%, or $291,000 per year. From 1998 to 2008, that number is up to $571,000 per year, 55% of our property tax. That's shown in these two charts. This is the building permit revenue chart. You can see from 1998 to 2008, it was always above $400,000. There was a spike in 2007. I think that was primarily due to the Village Center construction. But then since that time, we've generally been below $400,000 with just a couple of years of spikes. may see spikes like that in the future, but I don't think there's any question that we'll, as an average, will continue to decline in building permit revenues. And that's simply because we don't have that much land left. You know, back in the 90s and early 2000s, there was still a lot of subdivisions. We'd have, 40 new subdivisions approved and constructed, and that's a lot of revenue. Now it's, generally smaller subdivisions. So, and on the property tax side, the top line is the percent of the property tax that goes to the police pension fund. You can see back in 1998, that was around 40%. It spiked and depressed certain years, but generally it's been on a steady rise. Now it's up to 64% of our pension levy. So, just to reiterate, our current strategy for funding capital projects: 40% from the motor fuel tax, 60% from transfers from other funds. What are those projected reserves in those other funds as of May 1st, 2019? In our IRMA account, which is our risk management account, we have $655,000 in reserves. In our IPVC, which is our health insurance account, we have $126,000. And in our general fund, we have a healthy balance of $5.4 million. What is the recommended strategy for funding capital projects moving forward? Number one is find a reliable revenue stream that would be dedicated to the annual road program. And then to use general fund transfers, which we've been primarily transferring to the road program, to start using those transfers for other capital project funds, stormwater, sidewalks, equipment replacement. That would help energize those funds and get those back up into a better position. What are some of the options for a dedicated road program revenue stream? These are just some of the options. I would encourage anyone and everyone who has ideas to bring those forward. Nothing's off the table, in my opinion, on how we proceed. But some of the obvious and one-time solutions, if you will. One is to impose the additional 1/4% non-home rule sales tax, which was approved by referendum by the voters of Burr Ridge a few years ago. There was a referendum, and the residents approved a 0.5% increase in the local sales tax. The village board at that time chose to only implement 1/4 of that 0.5%, but that other 1/4% can be imposed at any time, just simply by action by the board. And that, we estimate, would generate as much as $350,000 in annual revenue. Another option that was thrown out there in previous administrations was reinstatement of the vehicle sticker program. That, depending on what you charge for vehicle stickers, that could be $350,000 to $500,000. It's not a real popular program. There's a cost to doing that, cost in terms of staff time and administering that program, but it is a reliable source of revenue. Other options, one is to take the plan that other villages do, which I strongly do not recommend, and that is to issue bonds. A lot of villages, I would venture to guess a majority, issue bonds every 10 years or so. And they have to go to referendum, and the voters approve or don't approve the referendum, and then they fix all the streets at once, and then they come back again in 10 years and do it all over again. And in the meantime, they're spending $250,000 to $500,000 in interest. So it's not an efficient way to do it. You don't get that regular cycle where you're doing it every year and keeping it up as well. But that is an option. Another option is similar, but more reliable and more consistent, is a simple referendum to increase the property tax with that funding dedicated to capital projects. And you could set that amount at whatever is deemed appropriate if you were to choose to go that route. And finally, the other one-time solution would be to become a home rule community, which would allow for additional taxing authority such as real estate transfer tax, but in our case, probably most significantly, it would allow for the expanded use of the hotel motel tax. As I said before, that fund is growing, and we expect it to continue growing for several years. We currently are restricted to using those funds for anything that encourages overnight stays. So we end up using it for events, for gateway landscaping maintenance around the hotels. We can use it for capital, but only if it's right there next to the hotel and it directly benefits the hotel. And we use some of those funds for marketing, which is an investment in the fund to try to keep the fund growing and stable. So those are some of the bigger solutions. Some smaller piecemeal things I think you could look at. We always talk about economic development and increasing the sales tax.
May I stop for a second? I know
Sure.
I'll also give you a couple of seconds here to catch your breath. Go back to the previous screen.
Okay.
Now, the last one, I want you to just expand upon home rule, because that's always kind of a complicated topic, or maybe I should ask our village attorney to explain what home rule is and what non-home rule is. Could you do that for the benefit of residents?
Sure. A non-home rule community becomes a home rule unit either by population increase. You exceed 25,000 in population, you automatically become a home rule unit with those powers, or you go to referendum and ask the citizens of your municipality to consider approving those powers. The powers that you have as a home rule unit that you don't as a non-home rule are, first of all, a non-home rule unit only has those powers that are set forth in state statute. So as Doug was mentioning, the taxing authority that the Village of Burr Ridge now has is all set forth specifically by statute. And you now take advantage of all those
It's
authorities.
fairly limited in scope.
Correct.
When you're home rule, you have more
And
taxing authority.
As a home rule unit, you have the ability to regulate in any area that relates to your government and affairs, which is a pretty broad category of, the scope of your abilities is expanded dramatically, including the ability to tax. The only limit on your home rule powers then, if you're exercising regulations as to your government and affairs, is if the state has legislated and said home rule units are limited. So if the state has expressly said you can't legislate, and one of the areas is pollution control, as an example, or elections, as an example, home rule units are limited just as non-home rule units are, but the state has to speak to that expressly to limit your authority. So,
And does it change the authority of the mayor's position or the trustee's position?
only as to the expanded authority that the whole group has. The mayor has no special authority under home rule powers.
So that would be a consideration down the road, should that become necessary to primarily to take advantage of the hotel motel taxes. One of the main benefits of that.
Correct. You can expand the uses for which you use that tax and the fund which you already have.
And what percentage of the, is it just a 50% plus one vote to pass in a referendum like that? Or is it any?
If the majority votes yes,
Majority votes,
then you
that's it.
become a home rule unit.
Thank you. Trustee Pezza?
About 12, 15 years ago, we discussed this in depth, and we decided not to go in the direction of home rule. That was a different time, but we did discuss it in depth at that time and decided not to go in that direction for several reasons.
I know it caused some problems in Bridgeview.
Huh?
It caused some problems in Bridgeview, as I recall.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
What were the reasons?
Pardon?
What were the reasons, please?
One of the reasons is the abuse of the taxing the expanded taxing authority that we would have. That was the main reason.
The potential for that.
The potential, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you could abuse your taxing authority if you didn't have people that were paying attention to the bottom line.
Thank you.
because this hotel motel taxes is just one of those little carrots out there. It's always so tempting to want to do whatever we can to, and we've been pretty aggressive and ambitious in using it for increasing tourism, but it can't be used for, road program and a lot of other things we could use it for. So I decided a little more.
I think it's wrong.
Which other villages in the area have home rule? Just curious.
Oh, I don't know the answer to that. Phil?
Is Hinsdale home rule?
I don't think so.
But they're over 25,000, I would think, population-wise. No?
Hinsdale is?
No.
No?
I think so. Oakbrook?
Oakbrook, Downers Grove, Darien,
Naperville, of course.
Naperville.
Right, so there are a number by population, and there are a few that have succeeded in passing a referendum to pass home rule.
You can also go back to Lombard, about 45,000 residents. They voted to take power away 35 years ago.
Went backwards.
See Snyder?
You get that hotel motel tax, the road leads to the hotel. You're telling me that we can't use some of that for the funds, for some of the roads to get to the hotel? So you're gonna tell me that if it's destroyed to get to the hotel, why would I wanna go to that hotel?
Doug, you had forfeited bonds of 800,000?
We had bonds that, over in the heyday of building permits in this village in the 80s and 90s, builders were coming and going, and a lot of them didn't claim their bonds at the end. Their $5,000 performance bond that they posted.
Right.
We would contact them and say, or sometimes they had one little punch list item and they just went away. So, I don't know, I think it was 10 years ago or so, we worked with Scott, our village attorney Euler, and we attempted as best we could in several different ways to notify all of these people who posted the bonds and gave them several months and several notifications to collect that bond if they wanted to. So a lot of people did, and we returned quite a few of them. But there were other builders who, the company didn't exist anymore, whatever, and we couldn't track them down. And so at that point, the village board was able to declare that as surplus, and we were able to use those funds elsewhere.
So it's now considered.
Now the bond, we're on top of it more, and we're able to pretty much keep that. Every once in a while, there'll be somebody, we set up a procedure going forward at that time so that, how we notify the bond person, the person posting the bond, and how long they have to claim it and all that, and we keep up with that now. So.
And would it make any sense on this is a huge topic, to have a separate public meeting regarding that and to brainstorm on these?
Sure, whatever
It would
the
just
board, if you'd like, I can wrap up. I'm almost through all the
I
slides.
think the best part is the next slide. The best solution is what we're about to talk about next, broadening the tax base. All this other stuff is bad. Let's talk about that.
Right.
So, other strategies for funding capital projects funds. Economic development, we continue to do that. That would not solve the problem by itself, not even come close. Even if you had a large car dealership, or maybe if you had a Costco or Myers or a super warehouse store or something, but I don't think this community wants that type of business, and nor do we have the land for it. So certainly that's always on the radar, and that's always a goal. It's currently a strategic goal of the board. In several different of your goals are to continue to address economic development, but I can tell you that's not going to solve the problem in the foreseeable future.
Perhaps not in the current box that we have, but if the box was bigger.
It would help, no question about it. But I'm skeptical that it would ever get to where it's going to increase by $300,000 to $400,000 a year. So a second option is, which I don't like this option, it's kind of like the bond referendums, special assessment or special service areas. Some villages fund their street projects by assessing the property owners on the street or who are impacted by it. And they get an assessment added to their tax bill, and they pay for it directly through that assessment. You can do that for all street projects, or you can do that for just non-residential street projects, for example. But that is an option, so that I do throw that out there. Other strategies, continue the current policy, which is to transfer revenues from other funds when available, reduce the programs when those funds are insufficient. Reduce the road program. Rather than a current 15 to 20 year replacement cycle, you could go to a 25-year replacement cycle. In my opinion, that's a significant reduction of services. It would require much more patching and increase the probability that a resurfacing project becomes a complete reconstruction project, thus increasing costs significantly. And finally, cutting costs in other departments via reduced personnel and reduced services provided. That's the extreme. I mean, much like economic development, one of our goals is to continue to look at costs and reduce costs, or at least maintain costs wherever possible. And that will continue no matter how we proceed with the capital projects funds. So in conclusion, staff is requesting discussion by the board of the options and strategies for funding capital projects and direction on how to proceed with the capital projects fund budget for fiscal year 2019 to 20. We will be diving into that budget on the staff level in December and begin workshops with the village board early next year in anticipating of approving the fiscal year 1920 budget in April of next year. As I said before, there may be other options out there. Everything's worth exploring, but I tried my best to kind of highlight those options that we were aware of and to bring those to your attention. And so we're just looking for your direction. If you want to take this information in, I can also put this on the website and get public comment on it if you'd like, and then we can come back and talk about it at a later date if that's your preference.
And do I understand correctly that you're projecting a deficit in 2021? Not 1920, but 2021.
Which fund?
They're all different.
I'm not sure which fund you're talking about. It was.
As it currently stands, the road program will be in deficit in 1920, but we'll address that. We'll address that with transfers if we continue with the current. We haven't approved the road program. The Street Policy Committee will look at the road program for 1920 at their meeting in December. We'll determine what the road program is, and unless we come up with an alternative strategy, if we stick with the current strategy, the extent of the road program will be determined by the funds available.
Right. But the biggest concern though is 2021. A bigger concern?
The longer we postpone addressing this,
right.
the bigger the concern gets. I mean, we can continue, and I was impressed, not in a good way, well, kind of in a good way. I was impressed when you look at the percentage that the police pension fund is taking from property tax, and you look at the amount the building permit revenues have gone down. I think that tells you what this board and previous boards have done to maintain other costs to continue that $750,000 a year road program, despite almost $750,000 a year lost in revenues during that time period. Yeah. Yet I think the board has maintained services at a very high level, and I think that's due to the board's decisions as well as our staff, who does a phenomenal job of staying within budget and maintaining a high level of services with the resources they have.
And I don't think I remember a year that Steve Stricker projected a surplus. It was always kind of the same thing, and then figure out that every year we were able to. So hopefully you're going to you're going to assist in that, but also, obviously, we have to be more proactive. So.
Yeah, no, I'm very confident that, if you stick with the current strategy, we'll make do, we'll make it work. But you're going to see at some point, the road programs start to get smaller and smaller.
Questions of Doug?
No.
And you would like any direction from, any additional direction today, or do you?
That's up to you. I guess primarily, what next step do you want to take? Do you want to have this on another agenda, or do you want to just wait until we get into the budget cycle and see where the numbers are coming in this fiscal for next fiscal year? Looking for your direction.
Gavin?
I think we should start the discussions now, so that'll give staff a little bit more direction as well when you're creating that budget. Because I see in the 1920, there's a deficit that it has got to be, and then it continues on. So, between what we raise with the motor fuel tax and what we get from the general fund, and I think it's something that we need to start covering now, so that we can get in front of it for our budget season, which is going to start in another month. So
I think following Trustee Purvey's, just put it on the website, make it transparent. We don't get, for the village, we basically get zero money. So at the end of the day, if everyone understands where we're at, if we need an extra 0.25% here or there, just to run the services that we already have, that we enjoy, it's better to let everyone know that we're not just passing things through on top of them.
And
Well,
Doug, does this include the expected revenues from, for example, McDonald's? It's not online yet, but we have a kind of an idea of how much we're going to be bringing in from them. Is that worked into these numbers?
Did we include that in did we know about that? No, we have not included that in any budgets because we didn't know if it was going to happen or not, but we will for next year's.
Right, I mean, that was an important consideration for me when I voted on it. Again, broadening the tax base, and I won't repeat the numbers again now, but I thought it was a pretty decent sized number, and a couple fines like that. I think I wouldn't dismiss the opportunity for economic development as quickly as we have. I think there's an opportunity to broaden our tax base, whether it's there's stores, there's gas stations, there's a lot of tax generators in this area that we have an opportunity to work with that could really help our residents.
It's also the pending sale of the Village Center with a more aggressive company that's hoping to fill up the Village Center, which we've heard a lot of great things about.
Yeah.
So a lot of things could happen between now and then. I personally like to go on record for never increasing taxes before we absolutely positively have to. I look at government as a tapeworm. That just the more money you give it, the more money they're going to spend, and I would like to find certainly more positive ways, more economic development ways of increasing it before, and only use the other options as a last resort. My own little editorial comment.
Two things. One, following what you said, Spectrum, the senior citizen housing, is that been baked into these numbers? I mean, the revenue that's going to bring in?
Yeah, well, that's the only revenue from that is property tax.
Okay.
And so that's incorporated into the new growth part of the tax levy from year to year.
And if we were to become like a home rule village, can we just kind of do a survey to see what the residents feel about that?
You can. I mean, we can try to survey, do a survey. We don't usually get very big responses on our surveys.
Right.
The referendum and putting something on the ballot is pretty simple to do if you decided to go that route.
Because most people don't know the difference between one and the other. You really have to list the pros and cons explicitly for people to better understand, for them to give an educated.
Because following Oak Brook's example, if Oak Brook is a home rules village, they do a lot of work with hotels, and the village looks pretty good too. So I think it just helps the overall village.
Is their population really 25,000?
That's under.
No,
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I
Little.
think, yeah, I think.
Smaller than us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought I heard somebody say 25,000. That didn't make sense to me. But they are home rule.
They have a lot of hotels.
You know,
A lot of
They've got a lot of money.
They got a lot of everything over there.
Yeah, yeah.
They have a lot of corporations that generate sales tax there.
Right.
That's where the predominant bulk of their sales tax come from, not from the mall.
Right.
But their biggest sales tax generator is leaving now, McDonald's.
I'm sorry?
McDonald's is leaving. They were bringing in a lot of sales tax, right?
Corporations.
Yeah, corporations, yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, but I know the Apple Store is the biggest sales tax generator.
right now.
And we just have to steal them, you know, or
I think so.
open up a smaller one here. That would work.
You're underscoring the need for broadening the tax base with sales tax generating or other businesses. I mean, that is the solution. That is the solution. Hard, but it's possible.
So, just to.
Well, I guess I would suggest that we'll post this on the website. You have the information now, and as we get into the budget in January, we'll bring this back for further discussion.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Okay. Under presentation of consideration of the next one, E, consideration of request for variation by Spectrum Senior Living for 2011 National Electrical Code regarding replacement of dwelling unit receptacle outlets. And I'm going to ask Evan to present this.
Uh,
Handle the board there for a minute.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a request from Spectrum Senior Living, the owners of Spectrum. This is a request for a variation from the 2011 National Electric Code. So Section 705 of the Burridge Building Ordinance states that the village board shall function as the Board of Appeals as it relates to our building ordinance. So in this case, we do not have a plan commission recommendation to bring you. This is simply a variation that came straight to the board. So we've come to a place with the Spectrum Senior Living development where we're nearly at the end of the development process, where we've got a temp CO out on the street right now. They're very close to being able to turn the keys over from the construction company to owner, and hopefully the operator here soon. However, we've discovered an issue with some of their electrical outlets that they've installed in several of their units, about a third of their units actually. That's in current violation, strict violation of the 2011 National Electric Code. When I say strict violation, I mean it does not meet the exact specific letter of the law regarding the location of electrical outlets in kitchen areas. So Section 210 of the NEC, the National Electric Code, provides spacing requirements for outlets in kitchen areas so as to prevent the need for extension cords, really to mitigate the fire hazards that would exist in these areas. And the purpose is really when we have appliances on our countertops, just for lack of a better illustration, our toasters, the cords are only so long. And when the outlets are so far away from each other, at that point we tend to see extension cords come out and fire hazards increase after that. In 58 of the 192 total units within Spectrum, there is improper outlet spacing, and the compliance with the NEC is currently not there. They're currently out of compliance based on where the current spacing of the outlets are in these kitchens. The developer has stated that this will be approximately a 3-week delay in the facility's opening, as well as cost approximately net in terms of cost to fix as well as lost revenue, $150,000 to solve this problem. The developer is here along with their architect. Spectrum is along with Vessel Architecture. We've also asked a representative from our building consultant who controls all of our building inspections and reviews, BNF. I've asked them to come here. So I'd like to invite Sean to come up here to quickly provide a more technical overview of what we're talking about, what the actual specifics of the problem is, as well as to give a timeline as to how we actually got from permit application to final inspection where we discovered these issues are in place. So, Sean.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sean with BNF Construction Code Services. In question, in some of the units, they have a peninsula and wrap around for the kitchen. In 2 of the areas, there's been a spacing issue. In kitchen counters, it's a 1-2-4 rule. For every piece of countertop that's at least 1 foot wide, you need an outlet, 2 feet from the ends, and 4 feet in between outlets. We found in one section on the plans as submitted, it was centered on the wall, a close 4'9" section. It would typically require 2 outlets. It was centered in the field. It was not caught on the rough. It was probably moved from one side. A small adjustment ended up moving that from a centered piece to 2 feet off of one wall and 2'9" off the other wall, exceeding that 2' maximum. The other spot is at the peninsula, meaning the rest of the countertop space ended up being 3 feet off the wall. So through the design phase, it showed above counter outlets along the peninsula, a total of 5. We ended up with 3, thus having a spacing issue. Is there any specific questions?
Do you
about?
have any pictures to show?
I can pass around, and then you have a packet that should have a photo. Did you see these photos in the packet?
That's the one.
Photos. The top photo shows you where you'd have to add an additional outlet to meet the requirements. So you can see that outlet that's closest to the stove or the range, is 3 feet. And the other portion, you can see where the outlet actually is provided and where you'd need an outlet to be provided to meet the spacing rules. So you can see the one up by the fridge, the lower photo, is a small adjustment.
So I have a question. You brought up the fact it didn't get caught in rough carpentry, or was there and they moved it after you visited?
The original plans showed it up centered on the wall.
Okay.
So we're talking about, at a rough inspection, you have studs, you don't have any mill work, so you have a lot to look at. Unfortunately, you have the electrician, the general contractor, all the designers, and the inspector looking at it.
Well, your first photo shows a drastic difference. The second photo, in a rough scenario, okay, it's what, 6 inches? Okay, I understand, and maybe it's not cool. But the first one, that's pretty obvious, wouldn't you say?
That's why why we're at this point.
Okay.
What would be the consequences of being required to fix what wasn't caught by any inspectors up until now?
The building code doesn't offer any relief. It leaves it up to the applicant, the owner, to provide it no matter what point along the path of permitting. So ultimately, the building code that you've adopted says it's developers and contractors' responsibility to provide a code compliance solution.
Consequences was expense and time. Do you have a projected open date yet? Or
I'm not with the operator. I don't know what their schedule is on opening.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
There was earlier
I just want to speak on their
3 weeks
behalf.
and 150 grand, that's what I heard. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
I think part of, I don't know what the part is construction versus revenue either. So I don't want to speak on their behalf.
So what is the NEC?
National Electric Code, it's the adopted electrical standard essentially on what we use to define the consensus standard for electrical designs for homes, commercial projects, dwelling units.
Mm-hmm. So you're aware of this code?
Yeah, that's what we're using as the basis of why they need additional outlets.
Was the electrician that did the work aware of this code?
I wouldn't want to speak on their behalf, but it was designed to meet the National Electric Code.
This isn't a code that only you know?
No, it is.
Most licensed electricians would know this code.
The National Electric Code and the Chicago Electric Code are the prevalent codes used in the Chicagoland area.
So I'm confused as why the electrician didn't follow the code.
I won't say that it was missed. There was some adjustment to try and maintain some of that spacing rules, the 1-2-4 rule I mentioned. So by trying to maintain that spacing, they inadvertently exasperated and created a larger issue on the other side. So it wasn't intentional miss. It was almost as if to maintain one thing, we created another item.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Trustee Francis?
A couple questions, please. Thank you. So to summarize, it was drawn correctly on the drawings by the architect?
It was centered on the wall. It was not perfect spacing by the code. It would, if it's a 4'9" section of wall.
Yes.
It shows it's centered on the wall.
Okay.
It's technically over space, but it's scaled drawings. It
Right.
wasn't dimensioned.
It's not dimensioned. Okay, so it was close.
It was close.
Close. And it was not discovered on the rough-in inspection, the electrical rough-in inspection.
Correct.
Okay, and it was discovered during the final.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So to help Trustee Schiappa, it's drawn by the architect who should be familiar with these codes or his electrical assistant to help him make sure that his drawings and documents meet code, and then our inspectors review the architectural drawings, which includes the electrical drawing, but they're not the checker. Our inspectors aren't the checker to make sure that the drawings are accurate, meet every code. It's the responsibility of the architect, and then the contractor puts it in according to the drawing. Now, yeah, he understands the code, and if he sees something blatantly wrong, he'll point it out. But on this instance, it wasn't caught by the contractor.
Yeah, my interpretation is the contractor is going to go according to code.
He's going to go according to the drawings.
Right. But
Which
it's
are-
also got to be according to code, otherwise it doesn't get approved and he doesn't get paid.
Yep, I understand, but his recourse is that I followed the drawings and the drawings are wrong. So that's typically how the dominoes fall.
I'm happy to refix it.
And was that correct, that I'd heard that to fix this is 3 weeks and 150 grand of cost? Is
I
that-
wouldn't want to speak to their
Okay,
costs.
That's your question. Okay, you're going to answer that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to speak on their behalf.
I'd like to get you back to the microphone.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mayor, and members of the board, and Mr. Pollack. There's really a couple of things at issue here, and I want to just kind of parse them out so they're a little bit nuanced.
Point of order, who are you?
I'm sorry, let me introduce myself. My name is Brian Van Winkle. I'm the architect of record. It's true that there are many people who could have and wish they did catch this much earlier in the process. And well, ultimately, I guess I need to accept responsibility. I could have caught it and didn't, along with everybody else. Nevertheless, we are at this point very late in the process where this has been discovered.
And Roy, can you remind us of the size, like the size of the facility, dimensions, square footage, units? Just give us an idea. Do you remember that stuff off the top of your head?
There's a lot of units. This is just over 200 resident units. So there's they're not 200 that have this problem, but it's a very large senior living facility.
And how many square feet?
Altogether, can I get some help? About 180,000 square feet.
2 stories, most of it?
Mostly.
You mentioned not all units have this problem, so
52 of 210.
Yeah, can I just give an overview real quick of these two situations? Because part of the reason that we're in front of the board is that we just have a difference of interpretation of the code, which I think is the kind of thing that reasonable people can have. So I'm going to just step over to the screen really quick. The first situation in Figure 3, our interpretation of the code is that when you're standing over where Evan is standing in this photograph, you're actually not in the kitchen or the functional part of the kitchen where these outlet requirements should apply. So our position would be that if you're over there, you're enjoying a cup of coffee or somebody's serving you sort of across the counter, but you're not actually preparing food or using appliances in that part of the kitchen. And so where that blue piece of tape extends there, we think that should delimit where the kitchen ends and really the living room begins. So the intent of these outlet requirements is so that you don't have to reach so far with your appliance to an outlet that you start to use extension cords, which are a fire hazard. In this case, we don't imagine that we would have a blender that's so far back in the corner you can't even reach it from the kitchen. We submitted this interpretive question to the National Fire Protection Agency, the NFPA, which is in charge of, oversees the NEC and issues code opinions on this. We obtained an opinion from them that we think agrees with our position. So unfortunately, I didn't receive that opinion from them in time to include it in your packages, but I did bring their statement. Sorry, that's amplifying, isn't it? It says that kitchen peninsular countertop spaces require one receptacle outlet in accordance with 21052C3. The spacing requirements for wall countertop spaces do not apply. So we believe that agrees with our interpretation. So in this first instance, in figure 3, we just think that that should be a non-issue. We do have outlets. If you're sitting at the peninsula and you want to charge your phone, right under the peninsula here, there's an outlet, and then there's another outlet on the end of the peninsula here. So in that case, we just have an honest disagreement with BNF Code Services on that question. On the second instance here, that's where we agree that technically, in order to meet the code, we would need to add a second outlet right there. However, from a just practical perspective of the spirit of the code in this instance is to eliminate the need for extension cords and the fire hazard associated with that. We just don't see this being a situation where we have that hazard. In talking with our electrical engineer about this, they actually shared with us that they have always had a concern in this kind of situation with having an outlet too close to the refrigerator, which, as you know, tends to collect magnets and artwork and things like that. So in this case, right in this area, we would expect that would collect paper and things over the years. If you had a toaster too close to that, that in and of itself could be a fire hazard. So we think that this is something that, while technically it doesn't meet the code, we think that there's good reason that at this stage of the project why this might be acceptable. Add to that this building is actively managed and operated by Spectrum Senior Living, and Spectrum, by requirement of their license in senior living, cannot allow extension cords in the building. So it's not just a rule, though. They have staff that are in and out of these units, visiting residents, and their staff are trained. If they see extension cords in any of the units, they have to come out immediately. That's not just in the kitchen, that's just anywhere in the facility. That's just for the safety of our residents. I think, sort of in conclusion, to wrap all of this up, I hope that the message that you hear from us is that we are absolutely committed to the safety of our residents. Life safety is a huge deal for us. For me personally, as an architect, protecting the health, safety, and welfare of our residents is primary. We just don't think that these two instances are jeopardizing life safety. Should I hand it over? This is Clinton Enyard with Spectrum.
Yeah, as Brian said, my name is Clinton Enyard. I'm with the owner. I'm going to defer to Brian and BNF on the technical debate in front of us here tonight, but just wanted to reiterate that we're owners of this building. We're not going to flip this building and sell it. We're going to be here for the long term, so we want to be good neighbors. We want to start this project off right. We've kind of demonstrated on our response to the many items that BNF has brought up, as that's kind of the normal, that we have a list of things to close out a building. We're addressing the vast majority of those as we speak. With the fire marshal, we've had a number of costly additional scope that we've incorporated based on the fire marshal's comments. So from day one, we've been trying to do the project the right way. Unfortunately, these ones kind of fell through the cracks, didn't get discovered until the 11th hour here. And because of the nature of affecting 50 plus units in our almost 200 unit building, and it being so late in the game, we're asking for for your consideration to allow us to let these existing conditions, which don't have a life safety effect, and don't really affect the residents' use of the space in terms of how the code is applied, ask for you guys to allow the existing conditions to remain as they are. So that's really all that we have to do, or all that I'm here for, and mostly it's with the timing of this, unfortunately, in the 11th hour, we're getting close to opening here in a couple of weeks, and we'd like to not have to notify the incoming residents that they have to adjust their plans. A lot of them are coming from homes or from existing facilities where they have leases or sale of property to tend to here, and adding 3 weeks at the 11th hour is going to be detrimental to them. So for those reasons, we'd ask for you to allow the existing conditions to remain.
Thank you.
One final comment that I forgot to mention. The facility is equipped, as you may have known, or might remember from the original approvals of the project, with a full dining facility. So our residents, while it's true that they can cook in these kitchens, they mostly don't. So we really don't have a lot of appliances in here, and so we think that's okay. And I would also like to concur with the sentiment that was expressed earlier that Evan Walter is awesome. He's been very helpful to us, met us at the building to kind of walk through these issues and sort of point us in the right direction for bringing this to your attention.
Thank you. Trustees, any discussion, questions of the staff or?
Can we get Evan back up here?
Evan, okay.
Yes. I think I called you on this earlier today, and you were telling me about there were supposed to be 5 outlets.
Yes, now there are 3.
Now there's 3.
Yeah.
Kind of a lot. Even if it was 4, 5 to 4, 5 to 3. In the first picture there, you're showing that it's in the living room. I could see a coffee pot there rather than all the way over there because I'm going to reach across, bring it over here, and put my extension cord. But that would be me. So my question is, in our code, building code, it states they got to have the 5, right?
Under the spacing that we have in the back.
Spacing in the back, and they should have 5.
Yes.
They're asking for us not to. When something happens to one of the residents, then what happens? Then we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, ultimately, it would be shown that the village would be granting a variation to the code. So.
Thank you.
Okay, why don't you wait for a second? Let's go through the trustee questions first, and we'll answer all the questions at one time. Let's go. Trustee Scott, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask?
I'm just surprised that it went through all those people and it was missed. So I'm just interested to hear in some of the other conversations and talking about this. And, I understand there's a time constraint, but I've educated myself on it, and I'm interested in dialogue with.
Once again, this is not a matter of moving the outlets, it's a matter of adding 2 outlets per office units? Okay, correct. Trustee Mattal?
The gentleman mentioned that there are some outlets under the peninsula. Do those count as a part of the 5 or no?
No, those are, they're located, like if you're sitting at your breakfast bar, your feet are underneath, those would count toward the living room.
Okay. Would there be any consideration to letting the residents move in and having these outlets put in by the end of the year? Would that be something that
That's something we've been talking about is kind of a unit by unit approach.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't affect all 192 units within the facility. Certainly the other, whatever that is not affected, and those could certainly be occupied as needed. But yes, I think we have talked about what that might look like. The fix would still have to occur, certainly. But yeah, it wouldn't be an all or nothing, at least I'm not aware of it being an all or nothing. I also don't want to speak for Spectrum in terms of their business operations.
Actually, let me, Ms. Jesse, you would, which one of you wanted to talk on this? Was the architect or the owner? Hey. Okay, why don't you just come up next to Evan, so maybe we do this simultaneously all at one time, answer the questions, and move on.
Sure. I just wanted to clarify on the question of the peninsula, what happened here. The original design called for this to be a raised area, so there would have been a wall across the back. And if there's a wall across the back, then we would have to have, that's why we had 5 outlets in there originally. So there was a change to the design where we lowered this down for accessibility to make sure that we could roll up to this side of the peninsula. So it made it flat. So there's no longer a wall. And our position and what we think that the NFPA agrees with us is that when you no longer have that wall and that flat thing, anything that's beyond 12 inches here is no longer considered part of the peninsula. It's no longer considered part of the kitchen and doesn't need those outlets. So I have that judgment from them. I think that John still takes issue with that, but nevertheless, we believe as a matter of interpretation of the code that we and the NFPA would say that this outlet's not required. So it's just a little bit of the history as kind of how that ended up. It's not quite like we had 5 and we only installed 3. It's pointed out to me that we actually have 2 under here. So.
And
we didn't go from 5 to 3. Really, the question is just about whether or not that one right there is required.
and was it Trustee Snyder, you had a question of them?
It was 5. It was
Yeah, but who had a question of them?
No.
Okay, Trustee McCall.
I just feel that, everyone can use a lot of outlets, and that's one way of avoiding extension cords. So, I mean, I think if we could just give them time so that they can just get it done within the year.
Okay. Trustee Pavesa, let's go around one time here.
I guess, to me, I don't see any major problem with a few inches off, but, again, I asked Scott, should there be an accident, should there be a problem, would we get drawn in because we approved something that's not on the code?
Would we get drawn in? Most likely. The issue of liability comes down to professional judgment. So whether or not this is the recommendation being made here comes from an expert that is recommending that the variation be granted and it still remains safe, then that's a judgment in our profession for a jury to determine.
And the change of plans, does that change anything at all with the requirements? Apparently it was lowered. Is that?
I can't answer. I don't know if Kevin can answer that.
Back to code.
Right.
Back to Evan.
What's that?
We go back to Evan, back to code.
Okay. Evan?
Delegate to Sean on this one. He's more code proficient on this particular question. You'd still have to meet the code. Usually, depending on the scale, size of change, it may need to be reviewed. In this case, the interpretation question about this is how we define where the peninsula is. The peninsula we're defining, our position at BNF, is the extension beyond the countertop space. That's where you get the one outlet over here. That's all you need per the code is that one outlet here. And then you continue on with your regular countertop spacing. Then the blue line, the dining area or living room, depending on what you call it, the code specifically talks about kitchens, dining rooms, breakfast, those similar areas. So is that a similar enough area? And the reason we don't count those outlets that are lower is the overhang is too large because there's a worry about pulling it off, getting stuck on something, and they're too low. They need to be 12 inches and they're center of the wall.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Mattal, our model?
Yes, it is getting to be a long night, I understand, Mayor. You asked my question, thank you, about the liability. That's always a concern that I have with anything we do. Then the other question is, am I understanding right that these two conditions exist in all of those units, and the same conditions are in both units, correct? Also, we have both of these conditions?
Yes, apparently. Okay. Trustee Francis?
Thank you. So could we get a copy of that NFPA correspondence that you spoke of? Thank you. Again, 50 units are affected out of 200?
Roughly.
So how did the 150 units get it installed correctly?
We have several different unit models.
I'm sorry?
Several different models of units.
Okay, so
this only occurs in a handful of the 10 or 15 different options that we have.
This particular peninsula and such. Okay. Is a peninsula you can sit down at and put your bar stool underneath and eat at?
Yes.
But it's considered part of the living room, that back portion?
Not part of the, it's not considered a part of the kitchen prep area. Again, I defer to Brian and Sean on the code debate on that one. They're the experts here.
But you're taking credit for the outlet underneath, even though it's not part, for the kitchen outlet, even though it's not part of the kitchen.
I don't believe we can, and again, I'll defer to Brian, but we can't take credit for that outlet from a kitchen standpoint. It's only meant, the countertop outlets are the only outlets under consideration here.
So in figure 3, up above, I can't tell very well from the picture, but is that a switch box?
Here?
To the left? What is that?
Sorry.
There's an outlet and a
Outlets
switch.
And a switch box? Double outlet? Okay. Do these kitchens come with built-in microwaves, or does the customer have to put in their own
Right here.
microwave? Built-in? Okay, so there won't be a microwave sitting on top of the countertop. That's all the questions I have for now. Thank you.
Just wanted to quickly respond.
Oh, sorry.
One more question.
Sorry. So, total number of outlets that would have to be added that you forecasted would take 3 weeks is how many?
Looking like 100.
100 outlets at a cost of $50,000.
That's, yeah, a rough budget estimate from our contractor.
15,000?
50.
50,000, okay.
The more concerning aspect here is the delayed opening.
The 3-week delay. So you've given those 50 customers their move-in date, and they'd have to adjust that move-in date if you had to do this work.
Yeah, we don't, we're not 100% leased at the moment, so I don't think there's gonna be 50, I don't think all 50 units are currently leased, but it's that, this kind of goes to what Trustee McCall was talking about, but with our community, temporary C of O is great for kind of where we're at in the process, and we're thankful for the village to give us a temporary CO right now, but in order to start our licensing process for full occupancy, we need to get the full occupancy.
Would you be willing to accept allowing them to move in with a temporary certificate of occupancy and perform this work at a later date within a certain time period?
We can only move in residents on a portion of the building with a TCO. We have to get a full CO to move in residents.
I don't know.
Let me just clarify, after the city is done with your inspection regimen,
Yes, the final inspection.
the final inspection that happens there, then this goes to the Illinois Department of Public Health, IDPH, and they come out with their licensing inspectors that will do a whole nother round of inspections on the building, and they won't even schedule that meeting until we have a final from the city. So that's the schedule.
But that all has to occur prior to the move-in?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We can move staff in, but not residents.
We can't stage this and allow them to move in, have this, do the work, and then get the final inspection. Okay. Just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the board? Looks like we have a conference going on back here. Anything we need to discuss?
Well, I was asking our attorney, it sounds like to me, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, that they need that full unconditional certificate of occupancy in order to go to the next step with your state licensing, correct? So I was asking our attorney if we could issue that and have a side agreement that addresses the implementation of the resolution of the issue. It's not attached to your CO, but we have an agreement, and maybe Scott can address how that would work.
Well, we would enter into a binding agreement with you to complete this work. In the meantime, we issue this variation that you're requesting. So you have your complete final C of O for your licensing process. But you commit by agreement to finish the work that needs to be done in these 50 units.
Yeah, I'd be happy to proceed down that path.
Okay, do you want to word the motion we need?
Well, it would be to grant, subject to completion of an agreement. I don't know what the time frame would be.
Yeah, that was my first question, I was conferring with Sean, I don't want to have this be a 2-year open permit here, so I'd love to have kind of a reasonable deadline, whatever you think as the developer is reasonable, ultimately their authority, but I'm thinking months, not years here. I don't want this to drag out forever, so that's my only comment.
Please get to the microphone if you're going to make any comments, please.
I do want to point out that, Evan's not quite done inspecting the building, so if we could find a solution that kind of gives us a method to address any other items that might come up so that we don't have to come before the board again, or maybe we can address that with a separate agreement. I think everybody would be amenable to that kind of approach. And again, in terms of the technical aspects, I still think that Vessel and Brian have a pretty good argument that we are in compliance, at least with this condition here. This is the one where I think we're asking for the board to give us a special consideration. So
I don't think we can give you a blanket agreement on anything that's not been found yet. I think we can talk about what we've got here. Is that what you were suggesting, or
no? No, I was suggesting that we come to an agreement on a framework for how we deal with those things when they come up, if that makes sense. If there's a way to give maybe the village administrator a discretion to address those items.
No.
But,
no. I don't vote this likely.
But that's not a subject for this meeting. So
sure.
Let's deal with this, yeah.
I don't want to have to come talk to you guys about outlets again in another unit.
We're not
when
nice.
that next one comes up. So
The other ones are right.
I'm happy to come to Burr Ridge and happy to contribute to the hotel tax, but I'm sure you guys would like to not have to rehash this again. So.
It's not part of it.
So can I suggest a motion? Motion for me to approve the waiver that has been requested, and the issuance of is this the final C of O for the facility? Issuance of the final C of O, authority to.
This is not the only open item. It would be conditional on completion of the remaining inspections.
All right, then this piece, this waiver of this particular aspect of the compliance with the NEC is waived as requested, subject to, and this isn't going to affect the C of O, subject to completion of an executed agreement with the village providing for the completion of this work within the time frame provided by the village. Okay.
So moved.
Second.
And let me ask this, is there any other authority the village needs to issue the completed C of O at this point relative to this request?
I think I can answer. There, as the inspector said, there are still some outstanding items, but I'm assuming since you're not bringing those up, that those will be resolved in due time.
Some of them we just got out on Saturday.
All right, that's a separate matter.
That's a separate matter, and those have to be resolved.
Let's just put this one to bed. Yeah.
Yeah, we as the village would still have inspectors' rights to go in and do the whole rest of the punch list. We're addressing one item.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Good idea.
Trustee Francis?
Question. So we're proposing that they bring these into compliance then? Correct?
Yes.
Correct.
You said completion. I heard the word completion. I didn't hear the word compliance.
Consistent, I assume, with the village's.
Yes, the ultimate authority, the goal of this is to give them their CO so they can move forward with other inspections and move forward. However, they will need to come into full compliance with the NEC on this item. We're granting almost
With our interpretation.
Correct. We're almost granting them a temporary variation.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Trustee Snyder?
Scott, do we need to put like a 3 months, 4 months maximum limit, time limit?
I
So
was
that
going to suggest 120 days.
120 days.
That's fine. 3 months, which is fine.
With
Thank you.
consequences?
So I'd like to amend the motion to a time limit of 120 days to get the work completed.
Okay.
And the petitioner is agreeable with that?
Can you restate the whole agreement just so we're clear?
So your waiver would be approved. We are going to complete a written agreement with your company and the village, between your company and the village, providing for the completion of this work, the specific requirements related to this work for these 50 units. And that work has to be completed within 120 days.
I think I'm amenable to that as long as we can still have a discussion about the item at the top.
Yeah.
Brian's the architecture record, it's his stamp on the drawings and his opinion from the.
If I could address that, I would like to look into that some more. So we need to see that letter we need to do our due diligence to confirm that.
And
that
I would
letter's
agree with
valid.
that as well. We just got the NFPA interpretation before the meeting as well, so.
Okay.
Now, is it going to be subject to that also as possible? So it's.
Yeah, that'll be handled at the staff level. If we determine that it means compliance, then that issue goes away.
We have a motion, a second, and an amendment. Is there any further discussion?
We have to second the amendment?
Pardon?
Does the amendment need to be seconded?
No.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. I thought you said, do we need a second amendment? We need a
we
second
do.
for the
Okay, so we
amendment.
have a
Oh,
first and
second,
a
okay,
We have an amendment and a second to the amendment. Now can I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Schiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Pavesa?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. Now we are to the residents' comments.
What about
Other consideration.
other considerations? P. P.
Oh, I'm sorry. Under other considerations. Other considerations, pronouncement, deliberation, and or discussion. Trustee Francis.
I would ask that on next meeting's agenda, we discuss the recently approved variance for the house the barn facility on 91st Street. It's my understanding that the Plan Commission was given inaccurate information as to what was, what the standard was for accessory structures, and that may have affected their decision, in my opinion. It's a rare occurrence that a mistake is made, erroneous information is given to the Plan Commission. In my 16 years of service on the Plan Commission, I don't ever recall an incident of that ever happening. But, so it's a great track record. This happened this one time. I think that it may have affected the decision. And also, in the Plan Commission discussions and at the board level, I don't recall ever hearing anything mentioned about a hardship with the land. So I'd like to have a possibility, I'd like to have it on the next meeting agenda where we can discuss amongst ourselves the possibility of remanding that back to the Plan Commission.
I'll second that.
How does that work, Scott?
Pardon?
How does that work?
Well,
It's not a motion.
I'm asking you
right,
to
so
All you
any,
do is discuss, put it on the agenda for next time to discuss.
discuss.
right, any,
Or could we do it today?
well, we can't do it today. We
Can't do
can't
it
take action on this today. Well, what it will require, if you're sending it back to the
Planning.
Plan Commission for additional consideration, is a motion to rescind by this board, meaning you are going to undo your vote on the recommendation that came to you from the Plan Commission. And you have the ability then to send it back, if you wish, to the Plan Commission for further consideration.
Does that motion to rescind happen today or next?
No, next, it would have to be on the next
So
agenda,
he puts on the agenda, so next board meeting, if it's rescinded, then it goes back to the Plan Commission.
if that's what the board decides, correct? It would need to be on the agenda.
I'm asking to have that put on the agenda.
Okay, and there's been a second.
Well, there's
vote
not
on whether or not-
there's not a motion or a
That
vote.
doesn't need a
I'm sorry.
motion. Any member can ask that something be put on the agenda, a future agenda.
Oh, okay, it does not require a vote.
No, we're not doing
And
anything.
then to be, and then, okay, that's interesting. So then when it goes to a vote, what would it take to rescind? Well, you have to rescind and then remand, two parts?
It requires a 2/3 vote to rescind the prior action.
And then a majority to remand?
Yes, to send it back to the Plan
It's two-
Commission.
Well, it's two parts. Is it a two-part motion? I'm just trying to clarify.
Yes.
It's rescinding first, and then it's remanding.
Right.
You need 2/3 vote in order to rescind.
Correct.
Okay?
Trustee
Model?
Francis, what were you referring to in the, didn't recall hardship situation? What did you mean about that?
For a variance such as this, requiring extra square footage, there has to be proof of hardship with the land. And not an economic hardship, not a self-imposed hardship, not because I think it'd be nice if I could have this variance, but a true variance stands on hardship with the land, and that wasn't asked, nor was it demonstrated by the petitioner. It wasn't asked by the Plan Commission, nor by the trustees, what is the hardship with the land, nor was it demonstrated by the petitioner. So that question needs to be asked of the petitioner.
That's right.
So I had remembered that there was a hardship. That's why, when I voted for this in the past, I had recalled the land was bisected by the rail line, and I recall your comments. You said you didn't even remember a lot ever with that situation. And
Correct. It was land was bisected by the utility, but then we came to find out that the horse barn was being placed on the same parcel as the house, not on the part that was bisected by the utility.
So it was your impression that originally the barn was going to be on that bisected parcel, and now it's not.
And I misread it.
Okay.
So.
Okay, because it was important to me. That's what I understood was the hardship was the bisected land issue. Okay.
But then during his testimony at our meeting, I came to learn that the barn was being placed on the same parcel, on the same northern parcel as the house is. So.
Okay. Yeah, I heard similar to you, so I was confused as well.
Thank you.
Back to the residents' comments. Are there any residents who'd like to address the board at this time? Okay, well, we have Alice first.
So first, thank you for bringing that back. It's been driving us nuts because it was a mistake. But I wanted to mention a few other things that were disturbing to me during this whole big process that maybe our administrator can address. One of the other things that came across was that the residents believed that a plan commissioner violated the ethics code as well. This commissioner, we believe, should have recused themselves from the discussion. I'm not sure about that. That's secondhand information to me, but some of these people might be able to answer that. So I basically would like to ask the village administrator if you could at least have a review with all the plan commissioner members, perhaps, to remind them what the policy is and to clarify that with them as to when they should recuse themselves. There are a couple of board members who do that, no questions asked. So that was just disturbing that I heard that. The other thing that just was a little disturbing, but you're resolving it now, and I appreciate that, is that, Mark Toma gave up and presented this problem at a previous board meeting, and of course we all trust our plan commissions very well. It was a 7-0 vote, obviously, but we've now learned that occasionally, very rarely, like Mr. Francis says, they make mistakes. Once in 16 years, yes. And all the years that we've attended the plan commissions, this is the first time we've also experienced that. But I did want to thank Mr. Snyder for at least at that time comment and ask questions for us. And the lawyer did then also make a comment. We just apparently chose to ignore the lawyer, sorry. But, I think that was a hint that the trustees probably should have listened to. There is another issue
clarify that, what you were just saying, because I heard that too, and I think you're misstating what happened. But what were you referring to?
I was referring to that he dropped a hint that if there was any question by Mr. Snyder or another member that there may be a potential error in what was presented, that you might want to remand it back to the plan. That's all. But it was fine. All right, we've got that part resolved. But there is another issue here that it has to do with the recent change in how the board and the plan commission operate, how they put these, the process, I should say. So the recent change that I'm referring to is that in past years, the plan commission would make the recommendation to the village board of trustees, who would then vote to approve the consideration for the ordinance. And then they would write up the ordinance. However, earlier this year, it was decided that you were going to combine, I have to read this, so I don't confuse myself, combine the approval of the recommendation with the ordinance. So it all happened at the same time. And what that did was it helped, in Evan's case, his goal was to expedite permitting. However, it took away that grace period where the board members, the residents, whoever could make any additional comments. They could make a revision, or it took away that time where you could make a correction, as in this case, a very necessary correction was needed to be made. So there was that kind of cushion before it actually was completed, the whole process. And if we didn't have that new policy in place, we wouldn't even be discussing this at all. We would have caught it before you guys voted on it ultimately. So I'm not sure I have that exactly correct, but I would like to ask then that our village administrator perhaps put this new policy or this particular policy back on the agenda for further discussion, so that maybe we should go back to the old way so that this can't ever happen again. It gives us like what I would call a little bit of a grace period before the final ordinance is done. And the other thing is, I don't know, sometimes can we really approve an ordinance before it's actually written? That seems to be the problem now that we've combined the ordinance and the voting all in the same process. So, and the last thing that just kind of bothered me about this whole thing is that really only one homeowner benefited initially, even though the residents expressed their concerns. And I think that was a little disappointing because it could have been detrimental to the whole community. I think the neighborhood did not get any benefit. However, now that you are considering discussing it again, and I appreciate that, this may give the residents the opportunity to clarify things. It may not change anything if it gets remanded back to the board. You have to remember that. But it will give them an opportunity and give us an opportunity to say, hey, you know, we don't want to look at a 122-foot long whole building wall. We want to have a part in the discussion as to what the landscaping, the drainage, the wetlands, and the insect control will be. So I think that by you discussing again, we could maybe come to a compromise on that and go from there. So again, those other little issues, though, were a little disturbing to me, especially about that policy of how we pass things now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. And Doug, do you have the question, the point that she's bringing? Could you elaborate on that at all, or you want to address that at a later time?
Well, the issue, the first issue that she brought up regarding whether planning commission members should have recused themselves, I have to learn more about that. If they want to let me know more about it,
Yeah, more concerned in
regarding the policy.
Something changed?
Yeah, a year and a half ago, we began trying to expedite some of the unanimous, non-controversial topics that come from the planning commission to the board. We used to most often have it come to the board as a discussion of the planning commission consideration, and then you direct the village staff to prepare an ordinance, and in a second meeting, the ordinance is considered.
So it's delayed 2 weeks.
We still do that for most all items, but you've noticed over the last year and a half, if we have a unanimous recommendation from the planning commission, we do an ordinance and a recommendation letter at the same meeting. The board still has the option of making it 2 meetings, but the assumption is if it's unanimous at the planning commission and it's unanimous at the board, we can take care of it and save a couple of weeks for the resident or the business that's looking to get their permit and proceed with the work. So it's a balance of the due diligence that Alice is suggesting versus expediting and keeping residents who are looking to get permits or businesses, keeping them, reducing the time period it takes to get that approval. If the board wants to reconsider that or just ask us to be more prudent in how we do that, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other residents?
Reports and communications from village officials. Non-residents.
Did any of the other residents have comments?
Pardon me?
Were there other residents? No, that was.
So someone there raised their hand.
Someone, I'm sorry, another resident was one, I'm sorry, I didn't see a hand roll up.
Good evening. My name is Stanley Smola. I live on 9161 Drew Avenue, Blue Ridge. I love this town. And I have a question about the easement. When I built a house 21 years ago, I had a survey, and behind my property there was an easement, and now it disappeared. So I want to know what happened and how that happened.
This is the type of issue that should be addressed at the staff level. If you'll talk to Evan Walter behind you in the gray suit, he'll give you his business card, and you can be in touch with Evan tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome, thank you. We have another resident that wanted to speak, I'm sorry. You need to come to the microphone, please, if you would, and introduce yourself again and where you're from.
I don't have a lot of talking to do, I just have a closing comment. Thank you, gentlemen, for having us. My name's Mike Marino. I've been a resident for 20 years, as you know. I'd just like to let you guys know that I'm a businessman. I'm a part of a police family. I'm a part of a firefighter family and a military family. And we're law-abiding citizens, and we just have comments and concerns, and that's it. When I first came in and heard that, about escorted out or anything like that, that's not what we're all about. I don't think that our wonderful village calls for that, and we've been very happy with our board, with our police department, with our neighbors, and this is one of the best places in Illinois to live in, and I love this town. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Now, once you go back to reports and communications of village officials, none? Non-residents comments? Okay, I'll need to go into I got a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Well, it'll be discussed, I say what it's for.
For the purpose of.
For the purpose of approval of closed session minutes of September 10th, 2018. B, discussion regarding pending litigation. And I need to add a third one for C, for personnel issues, just the discussion of a possible vacancy. So I have a motion to go into closed session. And also to appoint.
You do that in closed session.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, the open meeting is now closed, and we'll go into closed session.